For most of human history, the whole idea of money was tied to something real, something you could literally hold in your hand and say, this has value. And for centuries, that something was gold. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible story of the gold standard, a system that once ruled the entire global economy.
It really all comes down to this one huge question. Think about the money in your wallet. Does it need to be anchored to a physical object, something tangible for you to trust it? Or is its value actually based on something else entirely?
For thousands of years, the answer to that question was a resounding yes. From ancient empires all the way to the industrial age, societies around the world looked to one thing as the ultimate form of money, and that was gold. It was seen as the bedrock of value, the very foundation of trust.
So here's our roadmap. First, we'll get into what makes money real in the first place. Then we're going to see exactly how the gold standard worked as a global system. After that, we'll dive right into the great debate. Was it a golden age of stability or just a set of golden chains holding everyone back? We'll watch its dramatic collapse, and finally, we'll come back to that big question: what really gives money its value today?
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. The whole reason for using gold as money is built on this one core concept called intrinsic value.
This is what we call commodity money. And it's pretty simple, really. Think about it. Long before we had coins, people just traded stuff that was useful on its own. Things like cattle or salt or grain. These things had value even if you weren't using them to buy something else. That's the key idea. The money itself is a useful object. But as you can imagine, over time, one commodity proved to be way better than all the others.
So, of all the things in the world, why gold? Well, it turns out gold is kind of like the superhero of metals when it comes to being money. I mean, first off, it's unbelievably durable. A gold coin from ancient Rome is still a gold coin today. You can split it into tiny little pieces and it doesn't lose its value. It's super portable. A small amount is worth a whole lot. And crucially, it's scarce. A government couldn't just decide to make a bunch more of it. Plus, it actually has other uses in things like jewelry or even electronics, which gives it a solid baseline of demand. It was basically the perfect candidate for the job.
Okay, so we've established that gold is pretty great. But how do you go from just liking a shiny metal to building the entire global financial system around it? Well, that's where the gold standard comes into play. The gold standard made this relationship official. A country would literally say, our currency, the US dollar, is worth exactly this much gold. But here's the absolute central promise of the whole thing: convertibility. This meant that you, a regular person, could walk into a bank with your paper bills and demand to trade them for cold, hard, physical gold. That promise was the absolute heart of the system.
And this wasn't some abstract theory. No. For nearly 100 years in the United States, this was the magic number. The price of 1 ounce of gold was legally fixed at exactly $20.67. So a dollar, by definition, was just 1/20th.67th of an ounce of gold. This peg anchored the value of every single dollar in the country.
Now here's where the system got really clever. It had this almost magical, self-correcting feature built right in. So let's say the UK is buying a lot more stuff from the US than it's selling to them. To pay for the difference, actual gold had to be put on a ship and sent from London to New York. Okay, so now the UK has less gold. That means its money supply shrinks, which causes prices on everything to fall. Meanwhile, the US is getting all this new gold, so its money supply grows and its prices start to rise. And what happens next? Well, suddenly British goods look like a total bargain and American goods look way too expensive. So trade flows reverse and the whole thing balances itself out. It's pretty amazing.
But was it really magic, or was it a trap? This gets us right to the heart of the debate about the gold standard's legacy. Was it a golden age of prosperity, or was it a set of golden fetters, basically golden chains that held economies back? On one side, you have the fans who saw it as a golden age. They argued it created incredible price stability, made global trade super predictable, and most importantly, it forced governments to be responsible with their money. But on the other side, critics saw a pair of golden fetters. They argued that because the money supply couldn't grow with the economy, you'd get these painful periods of falling prices or deflation. And the biggest criticism of all, it took away a government's power to fight a recession. You couldn't just stimulate the economy to help people out of work. Your hands were tied by gold.
And this whole debate boils down to a fundamental, inescapable trade-off in economics. It's a concept called the impossible trinity. Turns out you can't have everything. A country can have a fixed exchange rate like the gold standard. It can have free movement of money across borders, and it can have an independent monetary policy to fight unemployment. But
You can only ever pick two of the three. The gold standard chose stability and free capital flow, but it gave up the ability to manage its own domestic economy.
And in the end, that trade-off, that sacrifice just became too much to handle. The massive upheavals of the 20th century were about to bring the whole system crashing down. Let's take a look at how it all fell apart.
World War I was really the beginning of the end. Countries had to print massive amounts of money to pay for the war, so they just suspended the gold standard. They tried to piece it all back together in the 1920s, but it was never really the same. Then, the Great Depression hit. The system's rigidity made a horrible crisis even worse. And it became obvious that the countries that ditched gold first were the ones that recovered the fastest. The final nail in the coffin came in 1971 when President Nixon went on TV and announced that the US dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. The gold standard was officially over.
So, where does that leave us today? Let's circle all the way back to our original question. If the gold standard is dead and gone, what actually gives our money value? Well, the answer might force us to rethink the value of gold itself.
And here's the twist. While gold is useful for a few things, that utility doesn't come close to explaining its massive price tag. The real reason gold is so valuable is because, for thousands and thousands of years, we've all collectively agreed that it's valuable. Its so-called intrinsic value is really just a powerful story we've been telling ourselves for a very, very long time.
And that right there is the big secret. The true foundation of the gold standard wasn't the metal itself, it was the shared faith in that metal. And when you think about it that way, it's not so different from the money we use today. A dollar bill is just a piece of paper, right? But we all accept it as valuable because we trust that everyone else will too. All money, in the end, is a system of belief.
Which leads us to one last thought to chew on. The gold standard was backed by gold. Our money today is backed by something else entirely, a shared trust in our governments, our economies, and in each other. So the real question is, in a world that runs on belief, what exactly is backing the money you use every single day?